my name is Miss Novak, one of the librarians at New Trier High School. I have a list in front of me of books that you're going to be given by your teacher. The ones in yellow are ones I'm going to highlight as good books to take a look at. These are books that we have the audiobook version and the ebook version available for the same title. Now, there's plenty of other books that are available just as an ebook or just as an audiobook in the same app. So just know that maybe you'll find one of those other versions, but maybe not both together. So the ones I'm going to highlight are in yellow, but again, there's other things on this list that you can take a look at if you still are trying to find something. I'd also point out that there's another tutorial that's going to help you to set up an app called Sora. That's how you borrow the ebooks and audiobooks. You can also borrow audiobooks and ebooks from your public library. And depending on which library you go to, Glencoe, Wilmette, or Winnetka, they tend to have different things available. So it's not the same across the board. However, they do have a lot of different things, and I would take a look at that because those are great resources as well. If you have any questions, make sure to email me, but I'm going to talk to you guys now about some different books available. When Dimple Met Rishi is another romance, but I would say it's, a comedy romance where two people who seem very different end up meeting and finding they have a lot alike. Dimple is Indian American and really doesn't want to have an arranged marriage, which her parents are arguing for her to have. She meets Rishi, and he has actually been set up by her parents to marry her, and she's only 18. She doesn't realize this has happened. He jokes about it, and she does not take it well. So it's very funny, but these two people actually find out they have a lot in common. So it's another light, fun one to listen to and read together. Another story is called Nixia. This is one of a trilogy. It is set in space and really is a spaceship adventure. It has a lot of teenagers who are gathered together by a company and set to a faraway planet to mine for ore. Along the way, they're given a lot of training, including combat. And it sort of has this reality TV series feeling where not all of them are going to be allowed to actually make it onto the planet. So they have to fight their way for who is the best of the best. Again, it's a trilogy, but you don't have to read all of them. And I think it's very action-packed and has some nice space stuff. So if you were to get it, just make sure you get Nixia and Nixia, not Nixia Uprising or Nixia Unleashed, because those are actually different stories. Another good sci-fi book is Divergent. This was turned into a movie, but I feel like the movie was very different in a lot of little details. But it's a society where there's different factions in a kind of a futuristic world where things have not gone well. And the factions are training to have different skills. And the main character in it is actually pulled into one of the factions that she didn't think she would be trained for. This causes a rift with her and her family, but along the way, she also is trained in hand-to-hand combat. There's a lot of great action in it. It's a lot like Hunger Games. So if you find that appealing, I'd take a look. Legend is another fast-paced story. It's science fiction. It has two different characters who are from a futuristic society where there are some higherborns with more rights and responsibilities and power, and lowerborns who don't have access to those things. They come in conflict with each other, but they discover they have a lot more that they share in common. The main character's brother is actually, accused of something, and she is trying to clear his name, and along the way encounters some things that make her realize the society they live in is much more complicated than she realized. It's one in a trilogy, and it's a very compelling story that kids really get into. But again, you don't have to read the entire thing in order to enjoy the first book or first audiobook. Another good book that lots of kids have enjoyed is One of Us is Lying. It's a mystery, and it's a lot like the story of Breakfast Club, if you're familiar with that movie. It has 5 kids who walk into detention, and there's one kid who's the jock and one girl who's the popular girl, but along the way, one of them is murdered. The story moves on from there, trying to figure out who is the murderer, and each chapter is a different character. It's very compelling. I will say, if you are someone who gets confused by different characters in different chapters, you may not like it, but it does do a good job of each chapter telling you the character. And I think if you're listening to the audiobook, that really helps because the characters' voices sound really different from the narrator. The story, The Night Circus, is one about a circus, but it's a very magical circus. And it's a fantasy book where 2 magicians are trained from a very young age to compete in a story of magic. It has a very fantasy element, and everything that they do in training for this circus is to prepare them to battle each other. But when they get to know each other, they actually really like each other. The magic in it is described in a nice way, especially if you like the idea of circuses. Notorious RBG is one of the few ones I have on your list that's actually a nonfiction story. And it's one that talks about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is actually one of the Supreme Court justices and who was one of the first women to argue in front of the Supreme Court. And her story is very inspiring. And I think she's one, if you want something uplifting but is grounded in the real world, is a great story. I Hunt Killers, and this is a mystery book for those of you who are interested in serial killers. It's very high action, fast pace, and a little disturbing. So the main character in here is the son of a serial killer and lived through his father going to prison. And everyone in the town he's in is always thinking he's going to end up like his father. And then when some bodies show up, he is now blamed for it. So he starts to investigate it. The next recommendation is The Skin I'm In. And it's about a girl who struggles with her identity and feeling like she is made fun of because of the color of her skin. And she has a new teacher that joins her school who actually has a very large birthmark on her face. And she thinks things are going to go one way, but discovers that this teacher really teaches her how to be accepting of the color of her skin and be proud of it and be proud of her identity and to help her communicate that to other people. Another book on the list is All American Boys. So another book is coming up on the side called Boys in the Boat. Ignore that, not the same. But for the All American Boys, it's a story about two boys who are both, one of them is white and one of them is black. And they both encounter the same event, and it's told from both of their perspectives. It's very engaging. It's by Jason Reynolds, who is a great author for lots of different kids. And it's realistic, but it also really makes you understand the situation and doesn't preach to you, but just shows you what the life experience is. Another one by that same author is Long Way Down. This is actually a story told in verse, and we have a few on this list. What that means, it's really like poetry, but it's also not as much words. And the language really tells a lot in a little bit amount of time. And I think this is a great one for anyone who gets overwhelmed by a really long plot line. This is a story where the kid in it is actually going down an elevator, and every part of the elevator he goes down is a different person he's encountering in his past. And really, it's a story about learning about gun violence, but it's really told very beautifully. And I would say there are two other Jason Reynolds ones that were on the list, and these are very appealing to lots of kids. But verse is also a nice thing for kids to read if they feel overwhelmed by a long story. Another realistic fiction story is Tell Me Three Things. This is very different in tone than the other ones I talked about. Tell Me Three Things, I would say, is more of a romance. It's about a girl who moves to a new school and is really struggling with feeling like she doesn't fit in. And along the way, she gets somebody who starts sending her letters and actually emails that are meant to help her out. But she kind of starts to fall in love with this person and just feels like they're supporting her so well. So it's a very cute, fun story if you like the idea of a relationship developing from a realistic story. Another good romance story is called To All the Boys I've Loved Before. This is actually one that was turned into a Netflix movie, so you may be familiar with the title. It's very cute. It's about a girl, Laura Jean, who writes actually a few years earlier some different letters to boys she had crushes on, and somehow these letters go out into the world and get sent to all of her crushes. And, some of which she doesn't even remember because they were from 3 years ago, and kind of the drama that ensues. But it's a very funny story. The book Dread Nation is a zombie story set in the Civil War South, where the Civil War was never finished and slavery still exists. This has an interesting dynamic for that part, but also there's a lot of zombies. Wolf by Wolf is an alternative history story where the Nazis have actually won World War II in this alternative world. And the story itself is a number of resistance fighters who are fighting against the Nazis who have control. And it centers around a motorcycle race, and there's a lot of action and adventure in it.
Dear Martin is the story of a boy who encounters a lot of prejudice because of the color of his skin. It begins where the boy is talking to his girlfriend outside, and a police officer sees them and assumes that he is actually harassing his girlfriend. This book takes off from there, showing a number of different situations the main character encounters and how he struggles to. If you find you really get into audiobooks, there's a great summer program called Audiobooks Sync. This allows you to take out a book every week and keep it for as long as you need it. What you can do to get this is in Sora, click on the triple bar on the top right corner, and click the green plus button where it says Add a Public Library. You're going to start typing in Audiobooks Sync. And if you use this, you'll check every week that collection and you can check out books from it. And again, these will stay with you all year for as long as you want to go back to them. They're not paired with a physical book, but they're a great option for audiobooks. There are also some books in the middle of this page called Sora Sweet Reads. These will be in our collection until the end of July. You'll see Big Nate and some other ones that are either middle school or elementary school, but there are some nice options for reading that can be for pleasure as well.